Your Timeline Roadmap to Explore the Fraud and Deception for Yourself by Judge Anna von Reitz. (1754 to 1776). The United Colonies take shape as a loose political association, and the First and Second Continental Congresses result. 1776. The colonies declare independence. 1781. The Articles of Confederation bind states, political subdivisions of the United Colonies, together in a perpetual union, creating a confederation of states to operate in the international jurisdiction of the sea. Note: why a confederation instead of a federation? Because the original states gave up some of their natural jurisdiction to the new political entity, the Union, they created. 1783. The Treaty of Paris and Treaty of Versailles cements this arrangement, splitting the land and sea jurisdictions between the states and the Federal Union, and places King George III as trustee of American interests on the high seas and navigable inland waterways, which means he kept control of American international commerce. The new Union entity operating in the international jurisdiction of the sea was always controlled by the British, and it has always been the British monarch's responsibility as international trustee to manage it and guarantee its proper operation. It has instead run amok for 150 years. 1787. The Supreme Perfected Republican Declaration of the United Colonies creates the national trust owed to the continental United States. 1789. 2 years later, in 1789, the Constitution for the United States of America splits off the sea jurisdiction and creates the new federal United States. 1790. A year later, the federal United States forms a commercial company doing business as the United States Commercial Company to provide the 19 enumerated services agreed to by the subscribing states. 1812 to 1814. The British try to horn in again and are beaten back. This skirmish results in the Treaty of Ghent, where the British interests in American shipping and commerce are reaffirmed and lasting peace is promised in return. 1845. The British monarch and Pope secretly agree to undermine the American system of government via the Treaty of Verona. The British monarch breaches the Treaty of Ghent, and both the Pope and the King secretly breach their trust as international trustees. They set out on a covert action and issued letters of marque and reprisal to the members of the bar associations, allowing them to act as foreign agents on American soil and as privateers free to plunder American commerce. 1860. Thanks to the efforts of the bar associations, a member of the bar, Abraham Lincoln, is elected to serve as president. Note that he is ineligible to serve as President of the United States of America by the Titles of Nobility Amendment to the actual Constitution, but is eligible to serve as President of the United States Commercial Company. This is the same situation we have with Barack Obama, who is ineligible to serve as President of the United States of America, but is able to serve as President of the United States Incorporated. 1861. The Civil War begins. Congress adjourns for lack of quorum and without a date to reconvene. Lincoln organizes a Delaware corporation, and the remaining members of Congress began functioning as a board of directors. 1862. The Corporate Congress, a body of men no different than the board of directors of IBM, changed the meaning of a single word, only and explicitly for use within their corporation. That word is person. From then on, the word person is deemed to mean corporation for federal government purposes. 37th Congress, 2nd Session, Chapter 49, Section 68. 1863. Lincoln signs the Lieber Code as Commander-in-Chief and puts the Union Army, the Grand Army of the Republic, in charge of the nation's future and money supply. A day later, he bankrupts the original United States Commercial Company. 1865. Lee's army surrenders to Grant, and a general armistice is declared. The southern states are in ruins and under military occupation by the Union. The original northern states are bankrupt. Foreign banks are in control of the new United States of America, Inc., and the Union Army reigns supreme. Over the next 2 years, President Andrew Johnson will 3 times publicly declare peace on the land jurisdiction of the continental United States. But peace is never declared in the international jurisdiction of the sea controlled by the federal United States under the trusteeship of the British monarch. 1868. The Corporate Congress writes itself a new corporate constitution called the Constitution of the United States of America, and palms off this look-alike, sound-alike, private corporate document as if it were the actual Constitution. This is fraud on many levels. The Constitution of the United States of America purposefully sought to confuse and delude the people into thinking it was the actual equity contract obligating the states to receive services and subrogate their international jurisdiction to the federal government. 1871. The Corporate Congress begins to set up shop for itself by creating a separate government for the District of Columbia. The initial effort fails, but 7 years later the Washington, D.C. municipality is created as an independent international city-state run as a plenary oligarchy by the members of Congress. Also in 1871, the Corporate Congress claimed to own the United States corporations. 41st Congress, 3rd Session, Chapters 62, 63, 64, and 65. 1874 to 1885. All the actual states on the land are reorganized, and at the same time completely new federal states are created, and new state constitutions are written for them. The original states on the land are renamed in this process. The original state of Ohio operating the land jurisdiction became the Ohio State, while the usurping federal state, merely a corporate franchise of the United States of America, Inc., operating the international jurisdiction of the sea, took over the same name, State of Ohio. 1900 to 1904. Still lusting after more power for itself, the Corporate Congress set up a second shop for itself and obtained permission to do it from the Supreme Court in a series of cases known as the Insular Tariff cases. As with setting up the Washington, D.C. municipality as a foreign city-state on our shores and running it as their own little oligarchy, the Congress now took the federal territories and possessions and made a new union of American states, Puerto Rico, Guam, et alia, and began calling it the United States of America Minor. They just forgot to add the minor part of the name from then on, and let people assume that all the repugnant laws they passed governing this constitutional democracy also applied to the continental United States. 1912 to 1913. A private association of European and American banks, calling themselves the Federal Reserve, bought the Governmental Services Corporation known as the United States of America, Inc., and its state franchises as a business venture, and began operating such familiar agencies as the United States Department of Agriculture and the United States Department of Transportation as private, for-profit businesses without telling anyone. They exercised the government powers they didn't really possess in a vast fraud scheme, in collusion with members of Congress, to institute a fiat monetary system and misuse their position of trust to put competitors out of business, set up monopolies, rig commodity markets, and commit other acts of blatant, self-interested criminality and fraud. 1917. Engaging in a war for profit, Congress and their banker bosses passed the War Powers Act and the Trading with the Enemy Act, and numerous other illegal and repugnant acts pertaining only to the federal United States and the international jurisdiction of the sea, but presented them to the public as if this claptrap pertained to the actual states and people on the land of the continental United States. Deceived by this venal and purposeful fraud, millions of Americans complied with what they believed to be the law passed by the legitimate Congress acting as deputies of the states and the people. 1918 to 1933. Once in control of the monetary system, the Federal Reserve increased the monetary supply exponentially, causing the Roaring Twenties. They built the House of Cards, and on October 29, 1933, they collapsed it, deliberately. This enabled them to put thousands of competitors out of business, allowed them to buy commodities, land, and labor for dirt cheap, and to manipulate the value of the dollar to their benefit. 1933 to 1940. The banks took full advantage of the national emergency they created, and the Congress did everything the bankers required. The Shepard-Towner Act, the Buck Act, the Alien Registration Act, the Social Security Acts, the Emergency Banking Act, and more. The purpose of all this was to lay claim to the labor and the assets of the states and the people of the continental United States by securing private contracts with them, enabling the perpetrators to represent them, and to set up corporations in their names. Hundreds of millions of Americans were told that they had to sign up for Social Security and have a Social Security number in order to have a job, that it was the law and that Congress had passed it, and so, believing it to be a lawful government mandate, when in fact it was a corporate fraud scheme, they were subscribed en masse. Remembering now the actions of the Corporate Congress in 1862, redefining the word person to mean corporation for federal purposes, and their later claim made in 1871 to hold ownership interest in all United States corporations, and seeing that their actions from 1933 to 1940 resulted in redefining the estates of the living Americans as public trusts, that is, as a form of corporation. You can see that the Corporate Congress has claimed to own living Americans as assets belonging to their corporation, and has also claimed to control and own their private assets. This is in flagrant violation of the Geneva Convention's Protocols, Volume 2, Article 3, and in equally flagrant violation of the 1926 International Conventions on Slavery, and in violation of every lawful and moral duty, commercial contract, and trust indentured owed to the continental United States and the American people. It is also apparent that all of this, every claim, every salvage lien, every title to land and property held under color of law, being held against the continental United States and the living civilian inhabitants of the continental United States, is pure, self-interested commercial fraud, created and perpetrated under conditions of semantic deceit, constructive fraud, misrepresentation, and mischaracterization by the management of the federal United States, the various governmental services corporations doing business as some form of United States, and the British government. 1940 to present. Among the first actions to be taken by the criminals was to register all live births. This established a claim of ownership on the baby and his or her estate, benefiting the state of Ohio or other federal state franchise. This act of identity theft, exercised via an undisclosed and enforced contract with the mother of the child, allowed each state franchise to control the name and the property of the baby. The perpetrators promptly set up new state franchises benefiting themselves using names styled like this: Joseph Quincy Public, and new municipal franchises set up under the auspices of the Washington, D.C. municipality using names styled like this: John Quincy Public. The only purpose for creating these franchises structured as various kinds of trusts was to act as a means for the privately owned governmental services corporations to hypothecate debt against the labor of the living people and their private property assets, and to exercise control over them, amounting to slavery.